east with a bit more cloud persisting. Now, high pressure dominates through next week as well, with a little bit more sunshine with some slightly fresher air arriving and temperatures around average, if not a little bit above.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio with the stories that matter across the country, with plenty coming up. Can new ministers in new departments focused on business, trade and innovation help kickstart the economy? We'll also have the latest from Syria with an aid worker and the trouble outside a hostel on Merseyside overnight. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here, once again, is Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. Rapidly approaching 1 minute past midday, here's the latest. Turkey's president says hundreds of thousands of buildings are now uninhabitable following Monday's earthquakes. Mr Erdogan says steps will be taken within weeks to start rebuilding. His comments come as the death toll in southern Turkey and northern Syria passed 24,500. Despite the conditions, rescuers have continued to find some survivors in the rubble, but they say the window is rapidly closing. Reyhan Besan is a Turkish journalist. She told us there had been warnings of the impending disaster.
Thousands of buildings have been collapsed. So where are they going to put all these debris away? And of course, like graveyards, morgues, these are all huge problems right now. Turkey wasn't prepared for this, even though people were warning about this. Like professors, they warned about this upcoming earthquake.
Well, meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is set to hold talks next week on delivering aid to rebel-held areas in Syria. Currently help to the northwest of the country can only be delivered by one Turkish border crossing. Syria's ally Russia does not back the aid expansion, saying it goes against the country's sovereignty. However, the UN Secretary-General says the Council has been too slow to act. The Shadow Home Secretary has described protests outside a migrant hotel in Merseyside as shameful and appalling. Yvette Cooper made the comments after 3 people were arrested on suspicion of violent disorder in Knowsley. Witnesses described the scene as being like a war zone, demonstrators throwing missiles and setting fire to a police van. Security has been increased following the incident, with reinforced fencing and a greater police presence. Local MP Sir George Howarth says the protest was triggered by misinformation, claiming refugees were feather-bedded. The Education Secretary could be set to challenge the Home Office's plans to cut migration. Speaking to the Financial Times, Gillian Keegan described the financial boost from international students to British universities as hugely valuable. She wants to increase the revenue that they bring from around £26 billion to £35 billion by 2030. However, the Home Secretary is currently reviewing the eligibility of students' work visas and their ability to bring dependents to Britain. Well, as the search for missing mum Nicola Bulley enters its 16th day, her partner says he wants to keep all options open about her disappearance. Paul Ansell was speaking to 5 News. Lancashire police say they suspect that the mother of 2 fell into the River Wyre, but no trace of her has been found. They're now focusing their search further downstream and out towards the coast. Despite this, Mr Ansell says his gut instinct tells him she did not fall into the river.
Personally, I'm 100% convinced it's not the river. People don't just vanish into thin air. It's absolutely impossible. So something has happened. Something has happened. Find out what it is. I want every house, every garage, every outbuilding, the land scrutinised. I want it all searched. I want it all scrutinised. Every piece of it.
A British drug dealer has been arrested in Thailand after a 5-year hunt by the National Crime Agency. Richard Wakeling from Essex attempted to import £8 million worth of liquid amphetamine into the United Kingdom in 2016. The 55-year-old fled in 2018 before his trial began and was sentenced to 11 years in his absence. He remains in custody in Thailand and extradition proceedings are now underway. A World War II bomb has exploded in Great Yarmouth. The blast happened as attempts were being made to disarm the explosives. Norfolk police say no one was hurt. Emergency services declared a major incident on Tuesday after the bomb was discovered during dredging work in the River Yare. The US military has shot down an unidentified flying object over Alaska. President Joe Biden made the decision to bring down the craft, which is the size of a small car. The UFO, which was flying at 40,000 feet, was considered a risk to passenger jets. It follows the downing last week of a Chinese surveillance balloon, which was flying over the United States. And the coronation emblem for King Charles and the Queen Consort has now been unveiled. It was created by former Apple designer Sir Johnny Ive. It features an image of St Edward's crown, which will be used to crown the monarch, and was inspired by the King's love of nature. The emblem also includes the Rose of England, the Thistle of Scotland, the Daffodil of Wales, and the Shamrock of Northern Ireland. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed, and a very good afternoon to you all. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak started the week with a reshuffle and unveiled government departments that will focus on science, technology and innovation, all for growth. The briefing from number 10 Downing Street was that it was all about the need to harness our capacity to innovate and nurture new cutting-edge technologies, all the next generation of telecoms innovation, medical stuff, as the smokestack dinosaurs of yesteryear and the metal bashers sink into oblivion. Well, the critics said, unfortunately, governments aren't very good at doing that sort of stuff, but others, from the nuclear boffins at Harwell to the super scientists at the renowned Crick Institute, were cock-a-hoop, as were the medical research charities and the Health Technology Industries Association, because it's all designed to pump some growth into a wounded economy. The week ended with the very latest economic data, which was a stark reminder of just how vital it is, because by the skin of our teeth, we have avoided slipping into a formal recession. But as the Duke of Wellington said of the Battle of Waterloo, it was a damn close-run thing. Merging the trade and business departments together shows that government's emphasis on science and how it's going to help science and tech help us all move forward for growth. For the first time in many years, there will be a member of the Cabinet specifically for science. Michelle Donnellan says that she'll have a relentless focus on using research to make people's lives better. Well, her Minister of State, George Freeman, will be joining me live on the programme a little later on. Now, the leader column in the Daily Telegraph today, which, if you remember rightly, said we need to have a profound debate to know what the economic direction of this country is, says, in the wake of the disappointing growth figures, Britain deserves better than stagnation. But it does warn, in asking what is the best way to pull it off, that the new government departments for business, trade, science and innovation will have to come up with rather more than just a few whizzy schemes to really create growth and wealth. Few mention the support of governments, though many say ministers can get in the way. Now, the thoughts of industry leaders in a moment. Former Director General of the CBI, former President of the CBI, who is also the former Chairman of BT and also EasyJet, a innovator of the current generation and a top recruiter of all of the really bright young folk that these new opportunities will need, should they blossom, will also be joining me. We're very keen as well to hear what you think. Do you trust government ministers to kickstart the economy in this way? What would you like done? Do please email me your thoughts at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or feel free to do it via social media. We're on please, ASAP. Let's kick off with the latest on the political agenda with our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who is here in the studio live with me. A very good morning to you. Looking ahead to the spring budget, and that introduction really underlines what the challenge is for Jeremy Hunt and his boss, the First Lord of the Treasury, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Growth, 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 growth. I mean, there is almost a cacophony demanding tax cuts on us as individuals, but really importantly on businesses as well. The corporation tax rises, which were very much a Rishi Sunak thing way back then.
Absolutely, and it's really a civil war now blaring at the heart of the Conservative Party between those of the Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt mindset who feel they're the sort of fiscally prudent ones who want to keep inflation low and use that as a base to build growth from there. They're also very interested in sort of the top-down growth that we saw in this reshuffle, these new schemes to promote science and innovation in the UK. But it's not about really allowing investment in businesses, allowing individuals to build up their businesses. And that's what the other side of the Conservative Party, the Liz Truss faction of the Conservative Party, if we can put it like that, the Coalition for Growth, want to do. So the big question is going to be, will Jeremy Hunt stand by the policy to raise corporation tax from 19% to 25%? It's going to be very difficult for him, and what makes it even more difficult for him is the news this week, very unwelcome news, that AstraZeneca is going to set up its new headquarters in Ireland rather than in the northeast of England, because, of course, corporation tax in Ireland is much lower than in the UK. So Jeremy Hunt Hunt and Rishi Sunak's argument that raising corporation taxes is a simple way to try and put a lid on inflation is being undermined by the idea that it just will prevent investment in Britain, and that's what we need to see growth through.
I mean, the AstraZeneca episode, the whole thing was gravely embarrassing because it was, as I said in my introduction, in the same week that Michelle was appointed Secretary of State and George Freeman back in government now as well as a science minister, which he used to do way back when he was parliamentary under Secretary of State for that job. And I'm particularly pleased that George is coming on the programme because, again, way back when, he was a venture capitalist in exactly that field. I mean, he is a minister who really does know what he's talking about. But if the ambition of government is to make the United Kingdom a standout operator in the life sciences, and your tax regime is such that a giant like AstraZeneca says, you know, I think actually Ireland looks a bit tastier.
Yes, absolutely. And there are those. Andrew Neil's written a very good piece in the Mail this morning, essentially arguing that Britain is sort of cutting off its nose to spite its face here. It's all very well coming up with. He dismisses what the Prime Minister has done with this reshuffle as sort of technocratic wheezes to create scientific growth, instead of doing the one thing which would really spawn actual bottom-up growth in the UK, which is, of course, cutting corporation tax. So it is going to be very, very difficult for Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak in these weeks before the budget to try and get all those Conservative backbenchers who are getting very, very twitchy indeed about these high-tax plans back on side. Now, Jeremy Hunt will argue, and has already started to argue, that what he and Rishi Sunak have achieved since taking office is stabilising the economy and getting us on a level footing. So their argument has always been that we can only lower taxes once we start to get inflation down. They say that the best tax cut is a cut in inflation. And they will argue that by avoiding recession, even if it is by a whisker, they have managed to sort of stabilise the economy, and that hopefully in the not too distant future there will be a stable enough platform to allow for tax cuts. But obviously there's a lot of argument about whether that's right.
Between curbing inflation and getting some more money in our back pockets. It's a tricky call, but we shall watch the spring budget with great interest. Olivia, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Olivia Utley there, GB News political correspondent. And I'm delighted now to broaden out the conversation from my general introduction on what's going on in government and various departments with a man who is a former trade minister and also former Director General of the CBI. There he is, my good friend, Lord Digby Jones. Always good to have you on the programme, Digby's. I mean, first of all, as I say, you're a been-there, done-it guy, not only running CBI, but as a trade minister in government. What was your overview of the restructuring of government departments with a view to try and harness innovation, science, technology to help with growth?
Good morning to you, Alastair. Morning, everybody. It was a big battle, not just when I was Trade Minister, but my predecessors as well, to get departments that were not absolutely linked with the word trade or business, actually to know that they're in the selling Britain abroad game too. Education, you heard in the news, overseas students are worth 26 billion a year to Britain, and that's an export. I mean, overseas money coming in, creating jobs in Britain, and also all of the science and technology. And don't forget that the biggest department, the biggest manufacturer by volume is food manufacturing. And if you think that innovation isn't invention is actually designing the thing. Innovation is taking it to market. Making it in a form that people will buy. A classic example are all these wonderful things that we all have, these things. And they, of any make at any time, somebody who invented it isn't the person who really took home the goodies. The person who did that was the people who innovated it, who took the idea to market. And that's what we must do, because if you make commodities, things which sell only on price, somebody, especially in Asia, will make it more cheaply and beat you. If you make something where there's value added, And it doesn't have to be scientists and health and chemistry sets. It can be automotive. It can be aerospace. As I said, it can be food. But if it doesn't have to be, in your intro, I thought you put it well, where you said the old smokestacks of the past have gone. But that doesn't mean manufacturing's gone. It doesn't mean that very clever people who innovate an idea have gone. And that application can be in manufacturing. But it's a totally different picture. Now, to try and get round that cabinet table, ministers who, whilst your guest in a while has been there, seen it, done it, risked money and done it. And it's delightful with George to see him as somebody who actually is coming to politics having got business experience. But so many of them, and Labour, Liberal, Tory, Scott Nat, don't mind who it is, they have no understanding of what it is to create wealth, what it is to add value, and then get on your bike, get overseas and sell it.
But also politicians of all persuasions have, generally speaking, a pretty ropey track record on picking and backing winners. Innovators innovate. Ministers, I completely accept, like you in your time, create the environment in which those innovators can either do it and, as you said yourself just a moment ago, get it to market and find that there's demand for it.
Yeah, funny enough, I was just, when you said the first bit, I was going to interrupt you, and then I didn't, because you said the second bit, which is government's job is not to hand out money and to pick winners to whom you hand out the money. The government's job is to create an environment. That was your second bit. Create the environment in which business can get on and do the job, and then get out the way and stop regulating everything to the point where, frankly, it's not worth it. Part of that create the environment is what you were saying with your earlier guest, this amazingly difficult thing in politics, which is how do you raise enough money to pay for healthcare and education and all the other, but without frightening off the people, companies, who could go to Ireland if you do. And you see, I'm not worried where the argument is, well, they've got a higher rate of corporation tax in Germany or France. It's not the point. If you've got an English-speaking member of the Euro sitting across the Irish Sea saying, come to mama, we've got a special problem. And what we have to do is be competitive. Now, AstraZeneca, if somebody sat down with them, I bet you the fact that they're going to be taxed at a lower rate is the thing that clinched the deal. But you've got to have access to skilled people. You've got to have a political climate that says, we're behind you, we're with you. And you have to have ministers in all departments who say, how can we help you? And a trade minister, plural, who gets on her or his bike, gets out there and champions companies like AstraZeneca and loads more. And it's not one little thing. It's loads of little things that come together. And it's so important to do it. I'm very pleased. When I was trade minister, I was 50% in the Department of Business and 50% in the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office bit, because, of course, overseas, you start at the embassy. And what you need to do is get embassy officials on your case and understanding business. And business, for the obvious reasons that you mentioned earlier, I'm delighted that they're going to get more science and innovation into the economy. I bet you there were loads of journalists and quite a few politicians who were quite upset that we didn't go into recession, because they love, the sackcloth and ashes, and, oh my God, we're failing. For the British economy, after all it had in 2022, not to go into recession by, as you say, just a whisker, but we didn't, and, a win is a win, I think is a fabulous achievement. But, of course, media being what it is, and school teachers and everybody else being what they are, they won't say it that way. They'll say, oh, my God, the economy is going to hell in a handbasket. What are we going to do? Well, one thing to do is you get positive and not negative.
You'll be delighted to know, Digby, that one of my other guests coming up shortly is a woman who runs the research for a recruitment organisation that specialises in seeking out these incredibly bright men and women for exactly those jobs as well. So, as always, labour is one of the most important aspects of the supply side. Oh, yeah. And you know better than I. Love you both. Thanks for breaking into the weekend, Digby.
Say again.
I said thanks for breaking into your weekend, and love to both of you.
Oh, It's a pleasure and great to talk to you, Alastair. All the best.
And after the great Digby, I'm delighted to say that joining me now is the great Sir Mike Rake. Mike is former chair of EasyJet and BT, and actually is former president of the CBI. So there we are, another guy who knows his stuff and also knows his way around Whitehall. Mike, what's your overview of this refocusing of government departments and sticking trade and industry together? Does it make sense to you? Is it viable?
Look, I think it's laudable, but I think we need to put this in context. I think we all understand, everyone understands, the last several years have been really difficult. We've all had to face the post-financial crisis era. We've all had to face COVID. We've had to face the post-COVID hangover, economically and inflationary. We've seen the problems on energy prices. We've had the Ukraine event with Russia, which undermined confidence. And what we have to understand, this country, whether we like it or not, we've added two other dimensions. One is, of course, is the economic cost of Brexit, which is real, and Digby was alluding to. And secondly, of course, I'm afraid, in fairness to what the government, now the Prime Minister, is trying to do, is the trust period undermined confidence of foreign investors in this country completely, and saw a complete collapse in confidence in our system, our currency, going down to nearly par. So to be fair, the first thing, Alastair, I would say is that clearly the Prime Minister and Chancellor, to be fair to them, their primary job is to re-establish their credibility of the country. And we must understand that, because this has been really costly. Again, to be fair, Digby's an old friend, and I've worked with him at the CBI and indeed before that at KPMG, and I fundamentally disagree with the position he took on Brexit. But however, what he said was completely right. Just now, the point of creating an environment in which business would feel the confidence to invest, that has the right regulatory environment, the right trade agreements, the right skills available to it, are incredibly important, because we've been suffering now actually for many years for continuing decline in our productivity, most recently a decline in our in our trade, with our biggest trade partner that we have to fix. We also have a lack of investment going on both domestically and foreignly, which is important, and we're facing a currency that has declined, that instead of giving us greater productivity is in fact, not helping with inflation. So there are huge issues to face. And I think we've just got to be careful, because however
do we also tax our people and our corporations at too high a rate?
Look, the overall tax burden is very high. Unfortunately, for a short period, it may be necessary. Personally, and I think most business people are in this line, we were not looking for personal income tax reductions. I do think there's an issue on the corporation tax. The headline rate of 25% is too high. But it's, as Digby, I think, was fairly saying, it's one of a number of elements you consider when you go. It's productivity, it's skills, it's the regulatory environment, it's the trade agreements. I don't know the detail of AstraZeneca, but it won't just be the tax rate. To be fair to the Prime Minister when he was Chancellor, we should remember that what he was trying to do was set a headline rate of 25%, but to encourage investment through deductions and allowances that would bring your rate down. I do actually think that, unfortunately, the 25% headline rate is something that is a negative. You add that to our sort of lack of a sort of proper trade treaty with our European partners, 45% of our trade. You add that to the issues we're facing on skills and recruitment. And, I think it does make that a real challenge, this 25% rate, actually, to be fair.
But when you also look at relatively straightforward things like infrastructure, I can remember in the Thatcher era, which we both remember very well indeed, and I first met you, I was an industrial correspondent, and Geoffrey Patty, I think, was the trade minister or the technology minister, and he was talking about the urgent need for a super fast internet highway, universally available across the United Kingdom, and we're still talking about it. The truth of the matter is that either BT and Openreach do it, or that it doesn't get done. It's not a minister sitting in Whitehall who does it.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to create that. And it's a classic case, without boring you with all the detail. We decided in 2008 to go ahead with fibre, we thought we did a deal with Ofcom on fair bet return with a reasonable return over a period and opening up that network. But actually, the regulatory environment actually forced us to slow down the rollout of fibre because we were not allowed the fair bet. Now that's beginning to change and we're beginning to move forward. And I think BT and others are pushing very hard. But there's no doubt, for a combination of reasons, that we were a bit slow. We got ahead of the game on 5G, for example. And it's very disappointing, and it's a complex political and economic and security question. But obviously, kicking Huawei out of our networks has set us back. So there are a number of things, as many things, Alastair, as you and I both know. It's never one single thing that causes the problem or solves the problem. It's a combination of the environment you're working in and your availability to deal with it. And public companies like BT have to pay attention to their shareholders too. So
Absolutely.
getting that
Mike,
balance
great to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, and I'm glad you've been able to do it. And today's subject is utterly perfect. Thank you very much indeed. So Mike Rake there, former chairman of EasyJet and of BT. With many more guests still to come on that subject. And hopefully we'll be hearing what your thoughts are, whether ministers are the right people to be doing this, what you think of the tax rate in the United Kingdom, both for yourselves and indeed for the businesses that employ you, perhaps, or that you buy stuff from. So let's move on now, and GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins will be joining me in the studio with all the very latest following the Merseyside asylum seeker hostile protest. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the all-important weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Hope you've enjoyed the weekend so far. It has been a fairly settled and dry one for many of us, and that is thanks to high pressure that is centred across continental Europe and stretching its way into the UK, keeping those weather fronts at bay to the north. There is a bit more of a squeeze in the isobars across parts of Scotland, so it is breezier here. Underneath that high pressure centre, though, there is a fair amount of cloud, and that will stay with us into the evening and overnight. A few breaks are possible, I think particularly for parts of north-east Scotland into parts of Wales later on. So it's here where temperatures will drop down a bit more overnight, down into low single figures. A patchy frost and some fog are possible. But where we hold on to the cloud for the vast majority, it will stay frost-free around 7 to 6 degrees Celsius. Into tomorrow, the cloud is going to stay in place, particularly for southeastern areas of England, so it will be another fairly grey and drab day here. But the breeze picking up across some western areas will allow a few more breaks in that cloud for parts of southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and into northern areas of England and Scotland as well. So where you get those sunnier breaks and those mild temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, it will be relatively pleasant. Into the overnight period, we'll continue to see more of that cloud breaking up. So perhaps an increased chance of some frost now across parts of Scotland, northern England as we move into the early hours of Monday morning. And again, the risk of some fog patches are possible as well. The cloud, though, going to stay in place for areas in the southeast as we start off the new working week. High pressure keeping things relatively settled, though, throughout Monday, but as we move throughout the week, that is going to start shifting its way off to the east, and that will allow some weather fronts to move their way in from the west. So by the time we get to Wednesday, we could see a bit more rain moving in across some western areas, but temperatures staying relatively mild for the time of year. That's it for now. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations.
for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
(12:32). I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Turkey's president says hundreds of thousands of buildings are now uninhabitable following Monday's earthquakes, but rebuilding will begin within weeks. His comments come as the death toll in southern Turkey and northern Syria passed 24,500. Despite the conditions, rescuers have continued to find some survivors in the rubble, but they say the window is closing. Mehmet Çelik is a journalist in Turkey. He told us rescuers still haven't given up hope.
Nearly 150,000 people currently are working in the earthquake zones with doctors, with rescue teams, with just volunteers. The whole country has mobilized to make sure that at least one life can be saved with each operation that is taking place currently.
Security Council is set to hold talks next week on delivering aid to rebel-held areas in Syria. Currently, help to the northwest of the country can only be delivered by one Turkish border crossing. Syria's ally Russia does not back the aid expansion, saying it goes against the country's sovereignty. However, the UN Secretary-General says the Council has been too slow to act. The Shadow Home Secretary has described protests outside a migrant hotel in Merseyside as shameful and appalling. Yvette Cooper made the comments after 3 people were arrested on suspicion of violent disorder in Knowsley. Witnesses described the scene as being like a war zone, demonstrators throwing missiles and they set fire to a police van. Security has been increased following the incident with reinforced fencing and a police presence. As the search for missing mum Nicola Bully enters its 16th day, her partner says he wants to keep all options open about her disappearance. Paul Ansell was speaking to 5 News. Lancashire police say they suspect the mother of 2 fell into the River Wyre, but no trace of her has been found. They're now focusing their search further downstream and out towards the coast. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. And we're going to pick up on one of the stories in your bulletin just there and run a little further with it, the one that Yvette Cooper was quoted as having condemned the scenes on Merseyside last night. 3 people have been arrested, as Ray said, on suspicion of violent disorder after clashes during a protest outside a Merseyside hostel housing asylum seekers last night. Well, GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins is here in the studio with me now, having spent the last hour or so delving into this story. Yeah. And I said to you earlier on, first light, there was speculation that it was asylum seekers, but it wasn't confirmed. Have you now been able to confirm that that was the focus of people's disquiet?
The best we can say is that it's widely reported. So it seems to be somewhere where asylum seekers are held, but the Home Office never confirmed. That's their policy, to never confirm that a hotel is housing migrants. But in terms of what we do know, this is the Suites Hotel in Ribblers Lane area of Knowsley in Liverpool. Police say they were initially called at 6:30 yesterday evening to what they describe as a peaceful protest. There was a counter-protest by organisations that support refugees. The police, once they had arrived, they then started to move the 2 groups apart And around 8:15, according to someone from Care for Calais, that's one of the refugee advocacy groups, they say that then the violence erupted. Missiles were thrown, bottles, paving stones, rocks and sticks.
Vehicles were set on fire as well.
A police van was set on fire as well. 3 people were arrested on suspicion of violent disorder. And police say they're looking into it now. In terms of local reaction, the local Labour MP, Sir George Howarth, has said that until the police have investigated the matter, it is too soon to jump to any conclusions. And the effort on the part of some to inflame the situation, he says, is emphatically wrong. He says those demonstrating against refugees at this protest do not represent the community. And going along with that is Councillor Graham Morgan, who's the Labour...
Ray was quoting Yvette Cooper for Labour, the Shadow Home Secretary, giving her views on what had happened. Have we got anything from the Home Office?
Nothing from the Home Office yet.
Nothing from Suella Braverman?
Nothing from Suella Braverman yet. So at the moment, they're still trying to establish the facts of this, the police, who started it. I mean, the protesters... who turned up with concerns about what was going on in the hotel. And we should add that these were based on claims about the behaviour of some people within that hotel towards young women. Now, these are claims. They haven't been verified, but that's why these protesters turned up. They're described as far-right by the refugee advocacy.
For the time being, thank you very much indeed. Back to what you do so brilliantly, and that is talk to the people that you know who know, and either feed it into Ray or come back in and bring us up to date here on Alastair, Stewart and Friends. But for the time being, GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins, thank you very much indeed for that. And you are indeed watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including following President Zelensky's visit. There have been debates about just how much the United Kingdom should be spending on the defence of Ukraine and the fight back against the Russian invasion. That is our next topic. But first, a quick break.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tonight at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood has been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio and online. And thank you very much indeed for so doing. As always, you've been good enough to get in touch on our big topic of the day, and that's the return of government departments and the focus on science and technology and innovation in the Prime Minister's reshuffle earlier this week, and the government's plans for growth. Now, Ken says, just tuned in, thinking about new ministers in new jobs, agree wholeheartedly, but these new ministers need to be like Sergeant Major and not give in to the civil servants. And Sue says Sunak and Hunt banging on about having to do everything to reduce inflation is a red herring, she says, because it'll reduce anyway as supply gets back to normal. Instead, they should follow some of Truss's policies for growth, especially lower taxes for businesses. That is what is best for the country instead. Do keep your views coming in. And also, if you missed the conversations I had earlier on today with Lord Digby-Jones and the great Sir Mike Rake, you can get that and previous programmes indeed on our YouTube channel. Just subscribe to that. It is, of course, at GB News at YouTube. Now, this week saw yet another development in the war in Ukraine. Ukraine's President Zelensky visited the United Kingdom for the first time since Russia's invasion and expressed his gratitude for all of the equipment that he had received so far, but has also urged the United Kingdom to provide fighter jets. He then went on a further tour of Europe, making the same request of other leaders in France and Germany and elsewhere. Here, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said that nothing is off the table, but has warned of the potential escalatory risk that supplying warplanes to Ukraine might have for the United Kingdom. There's also been some criticism and also questions asked about the amount that the United Kingdom is spending on helping Ukraine. Indeed, the Chief of the Defence Staff and the head of the Army have both made it crystal clear that spending and spreading kit too thinly is a grave concern for British armed forces. So, to discuss all of that, I'm delighted to say, as a good friend of this programme's and one of the top commentators on all of these matters, Con Coughlin, who is the defence editor at the Daily Telegraph, and there he is. Con, great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. So the language is that nothing is off the table, but as far as fighter jets are concerned, no chocks away yet. And Ben Wallace, the Secretary of State, seems rather resistant. Is that on the basis of economic concerns, strategic concerns, or our own defence capacity?
Well, there are a lot of concerns there, Alastair, and I think, the first one, and you alluded to this in your introduction, is, we don't have many warplanes. Since the Tories came to power in 2010, our jet fighter fleet has been halved from in excess of 200 to just over 100. And of those, once you dig down deep and service maintenance and repairs and all the rest of it, we don't have many warplanes. That's the first thing. And we've seen this when we gave the Challenger tanks to Ukraine. Immediately the army says, well, we need replacements because everything's been pared down to the bone or hollowed out, to use the military term. Yeah. So that's one concern. The other concern is it does take quite a long time to train people up to fly these very sophisticated fighters. Of course, Ukraine is not a NATO country. So Ukrainian pilots, though they've distinguished themselves in the conflict, are not trained to fly Typhoons or F-35s, which is what we've got. And furthermore, all our warplanes are used to being integrated into NATO systems, air defense systems, satellite systems. They don't operate in splendid isolation. They're part of an air package. So to integrate the Ukrainians into this is quite a big step and quite a complicated step. So when Ben Wallace says, giving a warplane like a Typhoon to Ukraine is like going from giving a bicycle to a Formula One car, there's some merit in that comment.
The other thing that struck me, and as you well know, being the son of a former Royal Air Force officer, there's another fundamental difference between the Royal Air Force's fleet of Tornado fighter jets and the British Army's Challenger tanks. And that is, thank God, at the moment, we're not engaged in a battlefield struggle with anybody that would mean that we might suddenly need, as we did in Iraq, all of the tanks that we had available to us. But day in, day out, those Royal Air Force fighter jets are on active duty over the North Sea, going out, checking on Russian bombers, surveillance aircraft. They are very busy bunnies.
They are, and they're overstretched, Alastair. As I said, we have relatively small numbers of available fighter aircraft that are serviceable. So, I mean, I've actually flown in a Typhoon from RAF Coningsby, and they're very, very impressive bit of kit. And what they're doing, as you said, is intercepting potentially hostile aircraft coming into UK airspace, making sure that all our underwater communication systems are not being attacked by Russian submarines. We've got a lot of operations going on there. Plus, we've got deployments of Typhoons up in the Baltic states to reassure them against any acts of Russian aggression. So they are very busy, and I'm not sure how many we've got to spare. If we really, and Rishi Sunak immediately asked, for an inventory after Zelensky had met him, and I think he'll find, it's a fairly miserable picture, which is why, again, you said in your introduction, both the head of the armed forces and the head of the army have publicly said, we need more money for more kit, and we're a long way from being battle ready to take on a major adversary like the Russians.
And I think that was something that Sunak said he was willing to do and wanted to do in the leadership campaign. I'm certainly trusted as well, but more money for the defence, but we shall see. Con, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your knowledge and your analysis as well. You take care, and you're always welcome on the programme. Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. The great Con Hochland, defence editor at The Telegraph, with his views on the state of play in the British Armed Services and Ukraine's request for fighter jets. Now, it has been 5 days since devastating back-to-back earthquakes and aftershocks hit large parts of Turkey and northern Syria, with the death toll now reaching over 24,000. The World Health Organization is warning that many survivors could lose their lives without urgent supplies. And our reporter Anna Riley has visited a Yorkshire charity to find out how they have been helping, or indeed trying to help. And a warning to you, this report does contain some graphic footage that you may find upsetting. Nevertheless, we think it's important to run it because that's part of our journalism.
Could you describe where you are right now? Where are you and what's happening?
This baby lost all of his relatives. He lost parents and his brother and his sister.
Abdul is one of the thousands pulled out of the rubble in Syria. He's just 18 months old and has lost his mum, dad and 4 siblings to the deadly earthquakes. He's been cared for at the SKT Welfare Hospital in Al Huda for broken bones and multiple wounds, along with scores of others. To help save lives, staff at its Yorkshire charity are working tirelessly to raise funds for vital medical supplies.
We've had so many children come in, young children, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old children coming in without their parents, being brought in, being treated at the Al Huda hospital, and then being looked after also. So our team is highly trained in this. We've been in Syria since 2011. For the doctors, we've been working around the clock, saving lives.
Hello, SKT Welfare.
Yeah, what cause would you like to donate today, please?
The charity's also raising money to provide food, shelter and fuel for earthquake survivors across Turkey and Syria.
The phone's ringing more than usual. The majority of donations coming through are for the emergency appeal, so it's good to see. Every penny that we get goes, it's 100% donation policy at SKT, so every single penny we get goes to that cause. It goes to the hospital, it goes to the shelter, the food, the fuel to run the generators. Everything that we get goes to them. So we have had a good response, and hopefully that continues because they are in need.
It's been distressing for the team to see firsthand the level of devastation that the earthquakes have caused.
It's very heartbreaking, yeah, because on a daily we're kind of working with the people that are there. So the team that are on the ground, we speak to them regularly and getting information from them. So we were, first of all, we were kind of like, we were very like worried about their well-being. On top of that, other people that are living there that we're supporting as well. And it's just sad to see children going through, you know, being pulled out from the rubble. And especially like, I've got 2 children of my own, and it's really sad, like knowing that, you know, if it could have happened to them, like how would I feel?
As more earthquake casualties emerge, staff at this charity continue to fundraise to help those in need. Anna Riley, GB News, Dewsbury.
Anna Riley, our Yorkshire reporter there, talking about the need and the efforts of those lovely people doing their bit to try and help those facing far worse prospects than most of us can ever imagine. Now, while Turkey and Syria welcome foreign aid after the quake, locals have also come together to help those affected by the disaster. Julie Seva is based in Syria and is currently volunteering with a disaster team. And I'm delighted to say that she's broken away from that just for a moment to bring you up to date. And there she is and joins me live now. So we said in the headline about the death toll, but what's the situation like on the ground, particularly in northern Syria where you are at the moment?
Actually, the situation is terrible. Lots of buildings are damaged, and especially in northern Syria, like Aleppo and Al-Tal, and they're now with no homes. They're in the streets, cold and hungry. And so many people are under the rubble.
Well, it's perhaps not surprising, given what we were talking about and where she is, that Julie, that we've got a problem with the link, and so we're going to leave it at that. But if we can get back to her with a clearer link, we will certainly do that. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with lots more to come on the programme this afternoon. We'll have more on Rishi Sunak's reshuffle that happened this week, and his focus on science, technology and innovation, and his plans for growth. All of that to come. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather here.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Hope you've been enjoying the weekend so far. It has been a fairly settled and dry one for many of us, and that is thanks to high pressure that is centred across continental Europe and stretching its way into the UK, keeping those weather fronts at bay to the north. There is a bit more of a squeeze in the isobars across parts of Scotland, so it is breezier here. Underneath that high pressure centre though, there is a fair amount of cloud, and that will stay with us into the evening and overnight. A few breaks are possible, I think particularly for parts of north-east Scotland into parts of Wales later on. So it's here where temperatures will drop down a bit more overnight, down into low single figures. A patchy frost and some fog are possible, but where we hold on to the cloud for the vast majority, it will stay frost-free around 7 to 6 degrees Celsius. Into tomorrow, the cloud is going to stay in place, particularly for southeastern areas of England, so it will be another fairly grey and drab day here. But the breeze picking up across some western areas will allow a few more breaks in that cloud for parts of southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and into northern areas of England and Scotland as well. So where you get those sunnier breaks and those mild temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, it will be relatively pleasant. Into the overnight period, we'll continue to see more of that cloud breaking up. So perhaps an increased chance of some frost now across parts of Scotland, northern England as we move into the early hours of Monday morning. And again, the risk of some fog patches are possible as well. The cloud, though, going to stay in place for areas in the southeast as we start off the new working week. High pressure keeping things relatively settled, though, throughout Monday, but as we move throughout the week, that is going to start shifting its way off to the east, and that will allow some weather fronts to move their way in from the west. So by the time we get to Wednesday, we could see a bit more rain moving in across some western areas, but temperatures staying relatively mild for the time of year. That's it for now. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604, Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. Hello and welcome back if you've been with us since kick-off. I'm Alastair Stewart and we are into the final hour of our programme today, and we'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio, GB News, and we have plenty more still to come in that hour, including can the new ministers in new departments focused on business, trade and innovation really help kickstart the economy and get some growth back in there to make a little smile appear on all of our faces. So let's bring you first up to date with all of the latest news today. Here once again is Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. 1 minute past 1. Here's the latest.
Knowsley Council in Merseyside says the Home Office gave it less than 48 hours' notice last year of its intention to house asylum seekers at a hotel where violent protests broke out on Friday. Witnesses described the scene at around the Suites Hotel as being like a war zone as demonstrators threw missiles and set fire to a police van. 3 people were arrested on suspicion of violent disorder. Security has been increased following the incident with reinforced fencing and a police presence. The Shadow Home Secretary has described the protests as shameful and appalling. Well, more than 2,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year, Home Office figures suggest. 110 people made the dangerous journey in 3 small boats yesterday. There have now been more crossings in 2023 than in January and February of 2022 combined. The Home Office resumed responsibility for Channel crossings in January, following 8 months in which the Royal Navy was in charge. Turkey's president says hundreds of thousands of buildings are now uninhabitable following Monday's earthquakes. Mr. Erdogan says steps will be taken within weeks to start rebuilding. His comments come as the death toll in southern Turkey and northern Syria passed 24,500. Despite the conditions, rescuers have continued to find some survivors in the rubble, but they say the window is closing. Reyhan Beysan is a Turkish journalist. She told us there had been warnings of the impending disaster.
Thousands of buildings have been collapsed. So where are they going to put all these debris away? And of course, like graveyards, morgues, these are all huge problems right now. Turkey wasn't prepared for this, even though people were warning about this. Like professors, they warned about this upcoming earthquake.
Well, meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is set to hold talks next week on delivering aid to rebel-held areas in Syria. Currently, help to the northwest of the country can only be delivered by one Turkish border crossing. Syria's ally Russia does not back the aid expansion. They say it goes against the country's sovereignty. However, the UN Secretary-General says the Council has been too slow to act. Well, as the search for missing mum Nicola Bully enters its 16th day, her partner says he wants to keep all options open about her disappearance. Paul Ansell was speaking to 5 News. Lancashire police say they suspect the mother of 2 fell into the River Wyre, but no trace of her has been found. They're now focusing their search further downstream and out towards the coast. Despite this, Mr. Ansell says his gut instinct tells him she did not fall into the water.
Personally, I'm 100% convinced it's not the river. People don't just vanish into thin air. It's absolutely impossible. So something has happened. Something has happened. Find out what it is. I want every house, every garage, every outbuilding, the land scrutinised. I want it all searched. I want it all scrutinised. Every piece of it.
A British drug dealer has been arrested in Thailand after a 5-year hunt by the National Crime Agency. Richard Wakeling from Essex attempted to import £8 million worth of liquid amphetamine into the United Kingdom in 2016. The 55-year-old fled in 2018 before his trial began and was sentenced to 11 years in his absence. He remains in custody in Thailand and extradition proceedings are underway. The US military has shot down an unidentified object flying over Alaska. President Joe Biden made the decision to bring down the craft around the size of a small car. The UFO, which was flying at 40,000 feet, was considered a risk to passenger jets. It follows the downing last week of a Chinese surveillance balloon, which was flying over the US. And the coronation emblem for King Charles and the Queen Consort has now been unveiled. It was created by former Apple designer Sir Johnny Ive. It features an image of St Edward's crown, which will be used to crown the monarch, and was inspired by the King's love of nature. The emblem also includes the Rose of England, the Thistle of Scotland, the Daffodil of Wales, and the Shamrock of Northern Ireland. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Alastair Stewart.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. Now let's get back to our main topic of the day, and that's the government's new focus on science, business and innovation to seek growth in the United Kingdom. But the question is, who will do what, where and how? The return of a new trade business department, bolting those two together, and the creation of a new business, innovation and science department, they certainly got their work cut out. And we had fascinating conversations earlier with, I hope you agree, Digby James and Mike Rake, who are, as it were, big business people from the front end. I'm delighted now to be joined by the new Minister of State at that new Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, George Freeman, Member of Parliament. Now, George, before entering Parliament, had a career in biomedical venture capital, so is very much a been-there-done-it guy. And you and I have worked together on a couple of occasions, not least for The Spectator magazine, at their health debate, where we talked to people like Phillips about what they were trying to do. What do you think, as a former minister in this area, but also a former investor in this area, that people like you and your fellow ministers can bring to the party to capture innovators and help them become vibrant businesses that can monetize their genius and monetize their efforts and help the entire United Kingdom economy?
Yeah, thank you, Alastair. Thank you for highlighting this on your show. It's a really important topic for the UK. As you say, I was 15-year career in clean tech, agri-tech and biotech venture capital before coming to Parliament 12 years ago. And I've been campaigning constantly with all the prime ministers as they've come and gone, that the only way we will get this country out of the boom and bust of short-term economic cycles is to invest more and commercialise better our deep science, research, technology and innovation. And 10 years ago, I led our first life science industrial strategy, and we invested in genomics. We launched the world's first genomics project, integrating NHS genomes with patient data, 100,000 NHS volunteers. It attracted billions and led to us leading the world in genomic sequencing, which is why we were able to develop the vaccine. But the truth is, we can do this in a whole raft of other areas, in fusion energy, in quantum technology, in AI, in agri-tech, in robotics. And so what we've done, I was Minister of State for Science, Technology and Innovation in the former Department for Business, BEIS. And what the Prime Minister has decided, and I'm absolutely delighted, I think he's done the right thing, is that if we're really going to deliver this vision, you need a dedicated, focused department. So this week, he's created, for the first time in the UK, a dedicated department for science, technology and innovation. And I think to your question, how? What are we going to do differently? I think firstly, in order to really take some big bets and back some of our big science and technology, whether it's space or whether it's fusion power, you need at the heart of government a body capable of taking the big decisions. That's why we've set up the National Science and Technology Council, sits alongside the National Security Council. Secondly, you need a department that is really focused. And BEIS was a huge department. The E stood for energy, so it was doing all the energy, all the net zero. And as Minister of State for Science and Technology, it was about 3/4 of the budget of BEIS, 2/3, 10 times bigger than the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. But it was a sidebar on that department. So we've created a dedicated department, and I'm absolutely convinced that we've got a chance here to really drive the leadership through the centre of government to make sure that we're not just winning the academic prizes, which is what we've done for years, but we're actually commercialising better. So in fusion, for example...
So brilliant young men and women who come up with a great idea in the next generation of technology, telecoms, artificial intelligence, any of those, they get in touch with you and Michelle and try to persuade you that they are potentially flavour of the month. And I hope I'm not misinterpreting what you just said, George, but you stand ready to back them if needs be.
Yeah, we've just to be clear, we've committed in this 3-year comprehensive spending review, the budget for the government for this next 3 years, a very tight budget, necessarily because we're trying to control inflation. We've put a 30% increase in our public R&D. We're going from 15 billion a year to 20 billion a year. And we've put a 50% increase into Innovate UK, which is the agency that supports emerging science and technology businesses. And we're doing three other really important things. On regulation, this is a Brexit dividend. We have an opportunity to set the regulatory framework now for new medicines, for AI in healthcare, for autonomous vehicles, for agri-tech, for drones. So the UK becomes a world leader, a test bed in these technologies, where investors from around the world come here to get the certification stamp of approval. Secondly, we're opening up procurement so that government can actually lean in and buy some of this technology, not least to help improve public services. And thirdly, we're changing the rules in the city so that our pension funds, London, one of the world's top 3 investment hubs, investing very little in UK science and technology. Why? Because after the Maxwell pension scandal and after the crash, there's a whole raft of very, very low-risk rules that mean that we're investing about a tenth of what the United States is investing in science and tech. Now, those three changes together will create, I think, unlock a new era, and you'll see science and technology companies floating here in London, growing here in the UK. So we're not just discovering, we're also commercialising and doing the D in R&D.
George, in addition to that money that you've just described that was in the last budget, do you also have the Chancellor's ear and the Prime Minister's ear on corporation tax and perhaps on capital gains tax? Because these bright young men and women, if they do get something really clever, and one of them's coming up in my next interview, and they then monetise their clever thing, which has then helped us all and produced the growth that we all desperately want, they then get hammered on taxation, as the AstraZeneca episode demonstrated.
Yeah, so look, I mean, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have made this a very major priority, and Rishi Sunak's only been in office for less than, 3 months. And, the first phase is to make sure we reassure the markets that's done. Gilt yields are falling, interest rates are back under control. Now the focus is on making sure that we unlock this growth. And the Chancellor's budget coming up in March will be obviously a key moment. I'm not in the Treasury, but he is, and the Prime Minister are actively working flat out this month or two. There's a huge amount of work going on to make sure that the R&D tax credits, the whole fiscal environment for innovation is right. But I would just say this, 10 years ago, when we started with the life science strategy that I led, biotech was flat after the crash. Pharma was warning they were going to leave the UK. Last year, we raised in biotech, so that's small companies, £4.5 billion raised in the UK. In AI and deep technologies, £25 billion raised, invested by private investors here in the UK. So we're doing some things right, but we're in a global race. China's investing $240 billion a year in science. America, $300 billion a year. We're now up at nearly 3% of GDP from 1.5. So we've doubled the percentage in the economy. We're doing well in this, but the key now is to make sure that we don't just grow the companies that then float on NASDAQ or get sold to bigger companies internationally. We grow them here. And the really exciting thing, Alastair, is, yes, we have the Oxford, Cambridge, London golden triangle. It's golden for a reason. We've got 2 of the world's top 3 universities. But actually, when you get into the other technology areas, it goes all around the country. The space cluster is down in Cornwall, satellite manufacturing Glasgow. Agri-tech is in South Wales and Norwich.
Sure.
Compound semiconductors, South Wales. So that's why Michael Gove and I are working very closely to make sure we support these clusters all around the country. That's the best way to deliver really long-term levelling up.
Lovely, lovely, clear, understandable, logical stuff. George, great to see you. Thank you for fitting us in. I know it's a busy weekend. And I asked you personally, as well as the team asking you, and I'm really grateful for you coming on the programme and having your fourpenneth, and hopefully more, if it all goes well, on how we can boost the prospects of these brilliant young men and women who have got great ideas. And I'm delighted to be talking next to one of them, or he had a great idea with his partners a little wee while ago, and that's David Nunes, who's the co-founder of British tech company Previol investment company, and also the investment company Fearless Adventures. Were you able to hear what George was just saying there?
Absolutely, and thank you for coming on the show, Alastair.
Did that fill you with enthusiasm, or did you think that that was a Conservative minister basically explaining how they wanted to be interventionist but still leave you and your colleagues in the driving seat?
Well, I think the question you started the show with is the how. And, what we see today is Rishi, he's obviously got a penchant for innovation and science, which is great, and it's fantastic to hear. The big question is Rishi a manager or is he a leader? Managers' first solution to problems is normally structural. How do I structure my team in a way to get this done? And, although it's great to have that voice at the table, I think the real clear piece now is the delivery. And I think one of the challenges that I see is even so quickly they've outlined their kind of first 6 priority outcomes of this new unit. And when you read them, it really fills you with, I'm really not too sure. 2 of them are around kind of how we become regulatory leaders. I'm never sure how our country can be kind of, global innovation leaders by focusing on regulations. One of them is, and to George's point, the idea that this unit has to focus 100% in delivering science innovation. How they do that by figuring out how to get gigabit internet across the UK at the same time. I mean, come on, that's an infrastructure project. The whole country needs that. So let's set this up for success. Let's get these people focused on delivering true innovation, supporting, startups and large companies to invest in the UK and to commercialize their products. And let's not distract them with huge infrastructure projects and regulatory burdens.
Sure. Because the thing that strikes me, and I'm not anti at all. I'm genuinely deep down very pro. I love the idea, but I've been around long enough to know that government doesn't have a great track record, whether it's a Conservative government or a Labour government, in backing winners. That's kind of not what they do. That's what people like you do. You are winners. You come up with your own brilliant ideas, and then you create an investment company. I mean, interestingly, George in a previous life did back winners because he was a venture capitalist in startups on science technology. But as an entrepreneur, are you confident, having listened to George, that this is a right and proper thing for His Majesty's ministers to be doing?
Look, I think having the voice at the table, Rishi now has somebody to talk to about this stuff that he's excited about, which is great. They can create a framework, even a language to talk about what innovation is and how it can help the country. Even to have that conversation, I think is positive. I think some of the challenges are, though, even in April this year, they're reducing R&D tax credits. So on one hand, they're saying we're going to become innovation and science leaders. At the next minute, they're reducing the tax incentives to small companies and large companies alike to really deliver on innovation. So those things are diametrically opposed. And I think those are the sort of things that he's sorting out very, very quickly.
And was I right in suggesting to George and also to Mike and Digby that the tax regime for individuals and for corporates and capital gains tax, which you will be very familiar with, I'm sure, is a potential, all of it is a potential disincentive to people like you who come up with a great idea, sports technology, and think, yes, let's do it here, but then maybe have second thoughts like AstraZeneca and think, well, maybe, it might make a bob or two more if we do it in Ireland?
Well, I think from a large company perspective, that's very much on the radar. When they're making big capital investments, clearly tax is an important element when they consider those investments. I think from a startup, it's slightly different. I think it's access to talent and most importantly, access to a financial system that allows them to raise the money to go and deliver those big ideas. I think one of the challenges the UK has, and it was raised again with George, this idea of the pension funds, the core investment community in the UK, they just don't understand how to take risk. In the US, they have this kind of almost like a winning flywheel. Investors have put money into big ideas. Those big ideas have made money. They've been sold to large corporates, and investors have made money, and they go again. They put more money and they take bigger risks. And large companies, basically pick these opportunities up or they list, and people make money. And we need to get that flywheel working in the UK. And I think that's probably more important than the kind of direct, okay, if I make money, how much tax do I pay? I think that's a secondary thought from a startup perspective. But I think that is a big, impactful, important part of a large company's choices.
Great to meet you. albeit via television, radio, and congratulations on what you've done up to now, and good luck in all that you do going forward. And thanks for giving ear to what my friend George Freeman was saying and commenting so objectively and lucidly upon it. Thank you very much indeed. That's David Dunes, co-founder of British tech company Previal and investment company Fearless Adventures. And we wish them all well. My next guest is Donna James, who I mentioned not by name but by role, as it were, in my conversation earlier on with Digby and Mike. The reason for that, if you remember rightly, was that Donna is research director at the tech recruitment company Populous Select. The context in which I mentioned you and said I was thrilled to bits that you were coming up in our conversation was because Digby was who's an old mate of mine, and I'm sure you know, former trade minister going way back when, but also boss at the CBI, and he said, reflecting upon the AstraZeneca decision, it wasn't just about corporation tax, it was also about the availability of skilled labour. And George Freeman was just saying that his department needs to be working very closely with the education department as well and the universities to make sure that we are producing the sufficient numbers of folk that if a company like David's comes along to you and says, hey, we need X, Y and Z, always reminds me of Dyson going to government saying, I don't have enough engineering graduates available to me at Dyson. And so Joe Johnson, Boris's little brother, who was the universities minister at the time, said, well, build your own university then, make your own. We're a bit ahead of that now, aren't we?
I think we are. First, thank you for having me on the show, Alastair. It's a delight to be on. You're quite right in pointing out that skills, producing sufficient skilled and numerous STEM workforce is the key to moving forward with the aims of this not insignificant machinery of government change. So in the 30 years that I've been doing labour market research, we've seen that dearth of engineers and a dearth of STEM skilled workforce, particularly women who suffer from, we see this leaky pipeline where the number of women diminishes at each stage of each stage of a career turn point. We are seeing engineers and skilled people coming through, but not enough. I mean, in our whole workforce, we're seeing a lack of skilled people. We're seeing skill shortages, and that's more so in the STEM workforce. If you look at the House of Commons, only 22% of our MPs come from a STEM occupational or STEM occupation or academic background. So the key is to grow more homegrown engineers, technical staff at all levels. The new apprenticeships are working. That's a good step forward. But we're still suffering those shortages. And I'm afraid to say that looking at primary school children, and I've done a lot of research with secondary schools students, but recently, last year, I did some research with primary school children, and we've still got a bit of a problem even at that level. You've got a lack of awareness of what an engineer is and a lack of desire to go down that route. Sure. It's really quite worrying, especially amongst young girls. They don't like the idea of engineering. They think it's dirty. Well, so I think in all, we really need to do some work in society to encourage people to go into STEM and not make
having an apprentice girl as Secretary of State for Education maybe And having George Freeman, a former venture capitalist guy, as Minister of State at the Department for Innovation and Skills and Science, maybe the worm is turning for the better, and you stand ready, I know, to find the workforce that these startups will need. Donna James, great for you to join us. Thank you very much indeed. I don't think I read out your official title at the very beginning, for which I apologise, and I should have done. Donna is the Research Director at Populous Select. And those were her thoughts on what's going on the innovation, science, technology front to create growth, jobs and wealth in this great country of ours. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon on Alastair, Stewart and Friends. After the break, we will be reporting on a wildlife hospital and sanctuary that says it is struggling due to the cost of living crisis. That's coming up next. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Hope you've enjoyed the weekend so far. It has been a fairly settled and dry one for many of us, and that is thanks to high pressure that is centred across continental Europe and stretching its way into the UK, keeping those weather fronts at bay to the north. There is a bit more of a squeeze in the isobars across parts of Scotland, so it is breezier here. Underneath that high pressure centre though, there is a fair amount of cloud, and that will stay with us into the evening and overnight. A few breaks are possible, I think particularly for parts of north-east Scotland into parts of Wales later on. So it's here where temperatures will drop down a bit more overnight, down into low single figures. A patchy frost and some fog are possible, but where we hold on to the cloud for the vast majority, it will stay frost-free around 7 to 6 degrees Celsius. Into tomorrow, the cloud is going to stay in place, particularly for southeastern areas of England, so it will be another fairly grey and drab day here. But the breeze picking up across some western areas will allow a few more breaks in that cloud for parts of southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and into northern areas of England and Scotland as well. So where you get those sunnier breaks and those mild temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, it will be relatively pleasant. Into the overnight period, we'll continue to see more of that cloud breaking up. So perhaps an increased chance of some frost now across parts of Scotland, northern England as we move into the early hours of Monday morning. And again, the risk of some fog patches are possible as well. The cloud, though, going to stay in place for areas in the southeast as we start off the new working week. High pressure keeping things relatively settled though throughout Monday, but as we move throughout the week, that is going to start shifting its way off to the east, and that will allow some weather fronts to move their way in from the west. So by the time we get to Wednesday, we could see a bit more rain moving in across some western areas, but temperatures staying relatively mild for the time of year. That's it for now. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's 31 minutes past 1. I'm Ray Addison with the latest news. Knowsley Council in Merseyside says the Home Office gave it less than 48 hours notice last year of its intention to house asylum seekers at a hotel where violent protests broke out on Friday. Witnesses described the scenes around the Suites Hotel as being like a war zone as demonstrators threw missiles and set fire to a police van. 3 people were arrested on suspicion of violent disorder. More than 2,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year, Home Office figures suggest. 110 people made the dangerous journey in 3 small boats yesterday. There have now been more crossings in 2023 than in January and February of 2022 combined. The UN aid chief, Martin Griffiths, has warned that the death toll in Turkey and Syria from Monday's earthquake could double. His comments come as the number of dead in southern Turkey and northern Syria passed 24,500. Despite the conditions, rescuers have continued to find some survivors in the rubble, but they say the window is rapidly closing. As the search for missing mum Nicola Bully continues 16 days since her disappearance, her partner says his gut instinct tells him she did not fall into the river. Paul Ansell was speaking to 5 News. Lancashire police say they suspect the mother of 2 fell into the River Wyre, but no trace of her has been found. They're now focusing their search further downstream and out towards the coast. And a British drug dealer has been arrested in Thailand after a 5-year manhunt by the National Crime Agency. Richard Wakeling from Essex attempted to import £8 million worth of liquid amphetamine into the UK in 2016. The 55-year-old fled in 2018 before his trial began. He was sentenced to 11 years in his absence. We're on TV, online and on DAB Plus Radio. This is GB News. Back now to Alastair, Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. A wildlife hospital and sanctuary says that it is struggling due to the cost of living crisis. The North London charity says that it suffered huge losses during the pandemic, and with visitor numbers falling and the cost of animal food rising, it is now fearful for its future. Well, GB News London reporter Elisa Hartle brings us this report on their plight.
The Wildlife Rescue and Ambulance Service has been open for 22 years. Based in Trent Park, North London, wild animals and abandoned pets are nursed back to health. And for those that can't be released back into the wild or rehomed, a home is offered where there is room.
Since COVID and now the cost of living, that's done it again. We've had to shut the shop 2 times a week because I can't afford to pay someone to work out there. And footfall's gone down anyway, so of course the centre's not making any money.
The charity relies on donations, the money brought in from visitors paying to visit the animal sanctuary and cafe. But since the cost of living crisis, the charity has struggled.
Not quite sure how much it cost at the moment, but last year it cost us to run this centre 174,000. The calls are all day long. They'll get worse as springtime arrives. So there's more of a workload. We could take in so much more if we had the space, but we have to look upon the cost. You can only deal with what you've either got the space for or what you've got the money to deal with. We've noticed a drop in the footfall at the moment, whether people are not spending so much, people are not visiting the centre so much because of cost, and donations have dropped. People have cancelled direct debits, probably because they can't afford to do it no more. So there's been a drop in income all around and costs have gone up. So at the moment, I think like a lot of charities, from what I see by looking at other charities, we're all concerned about what's going to happen.
June and Barry, who were awarded an MBE for their charity work, also have dedicated volunteers.
You've only got to stand next to Barry for
an hour or two and see how many times the phone rings with people that have got animals that need help. And it's just constant. So absolutely vital, and else an awful lot of animals wouldn't survive.
It's hoped that the number of people visiting the sanctuary pick up during the summer, so that June and Barry can continue their dedication to saving the lives of animals. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Well, we wish them well and the animals that they kindly care for, but goodness me, that's so true about the costs and the difficulties people are now facing. Our reporter there, Lisa Hartle, GB News London correspondent. Now, you've been getting in touch more on our big topic of the day, the cabinet reshuffle, and that shift and focus to business and innovation and technology. Norman joins the conversation saying, I believe that the madness of net zero will destroy our car industry and seriously diminish growth of worthwhile projects. Phil says Jeremy Hunt was the minister who ran the National Health Service into the ground, but everyone seems to think he is the best person for the job of Chancellor. In reality, I think that he has no interest in the working population, just technology, finance and banking. Michael says just more talk. When the first modular nuclear reactor when is the first modular nuclear reactor going to be built with Rolls-Royce? The government have been talking about it for a year. That is, I think, broadly true. Anyway, do keep your views coming in. We always welcome them. And also, if you missed those conversations that we had with the Minister, George Freeman, or the innovator and the recruitment expert, they are all available on our YouTube channel, which is, of course, surprise, surprise, at GB News. So you may want to subscribe to that, and I wish you well, and thank you if you do. You're watching GB News, TV and radio, with more still to come here on Alastair, Stewart and Friends, as we wend our merry way through the afternoon. A new report suggests that the cost of living crisis could be more detrimental to the nightclub industry than COVID was. We'll be discussing that next, but first, a quick break.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, at 9:30 on Sunday morning when I'll be speaking to Sir Simon Mayo, former Deputy Chief of Defence Staff, about President Zelensky's demand for British fighter jets. I'll also be asking Tory MP Tobias Ellwood, Chair of the Defence Select Committee, whether the UK is spending enough on defence. And PR guru Joe Tanner, former advisor to Boris Johnson, will be taking me through the newspaper headlines. All that and more at 9:30 tomorrow.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations. for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello again, you're watching and listening to Alastair, Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. And thank you very much indeed for so doing. Now, the cost of living crisis could be more detrimental to nightclubs than COVID was, according to a report by the Nighttime Industries Association. Over 300 clubs have already closed their doors since the start of the pandemic due to soaring bills and rents. But what can be done to keep people on the dance floor? Joining me to discuss this now, I'm delighted to say, is the Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association, our old friend on this programme, Michael Kill. Mike, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. So 300 gone. This is a serious analysis of your members' prospects and concerns. How bad could it be, Mike?
Well, thanks for having us on. I mean, it's hugely challenging for the sector, particularly the late night sector, nightclubs being those sort of pinnacle end of evening businesses. The cost of operating is extortionate at the moment. As you can appreciate, there is a legacy of issues from the pandemic, and we've seen 365 nightclubs gone since the start of the pandemic. So we've come down for the first time almost under 900 nightclubs from almost 1,400 several years back. So it's hugely concerning for us, and the future is still challenging, hence the reason why we're calling for support from the government for businesses that are most at risk.
What are you doing, as it were, to be innovative and try and attract more people in there? Because, I mean, it's not bums on seats, quite the opposite. That's theatre. I mean, it's feet on dance floors and people at bars and stuff like that. Has the offer changed as you face those much higher costs?
I think there's a misconception here, and I think the worry is it's not the requirement that is lacking. There is the report that we've put out is how strong things like electronic music are across the UK. The challenge that we have is the operating conditions through cost inflation are making it very, very difficult for operators. We've seen 8 out of 10 either barely breaking even or losing money, and that's not sustainable over long periods of time. So what we're after is really some financial headroom from the government within the budget, and many are calling for a VAT cut to allow people that financial fluidity, particularly the independents, because we've seen the businesses who are independently owned contract by about 13% across the UK, where managed businesses only 3%. So there is a very clear disparity in terms of the way that independents are being impacted, the cash fluidity that they have, and cost inflation impacting them heavily, which we're going to see as this year transpires. But we've already lost many businesses early doors, and we're trying to stem or stop the damage by ensuring that the government are clear in terms of the businesses that are most at risk.
What's your most recent estimate, Mike, of the value to the economy of your sector? I mean, in terms of employment, and clearly there's, you mentioned VAT there, but also there's duty on drinks and stuff like that. What do you think your sector contributes to the UK economy?
Well, at the moment, I mean, the estimates from we're due a report that's due out on Monday, but last year saw £112 billion in total revenue, about 50 billion to the Treasury. So for us, we're a huge void to lose when businesses start closing. And when we talk about voids, and many people say, how are we going to pay for this? The reality is by not doing something and sitting dormant, we're going to lose these businesses, which is going to create a void in terms of the return to HM Treasury. So from our perspective, we're doing everything possible. We're making sure that the government are fully aware on the stats and the data, hence the reason why we've come out with the electronic music report that shows that its value in terms of counterculture is some 2.63 billion. So we're a really, really important industry. And in many parts, we need that front seat at the table. Hospitality is important. Nighttime economy is important. And I think the really key thing here to take away is they need to understand that we're vitally important for creating traction and a massive part of the recovery process. So we need to be kicking, we need to be moving forward, and we need that cash fluidity, which we didn't gain from the festive period because of the challenges around industrial action. So many of us are now having to pivot, as you quite rightly said, and try and challenge things in different ways. But we're starting to move, but we just need that additional help from government.
Mike, good to talk to you as always. Thank you very much indeed for those facts and figures. Mike Kildare, the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Always welcome on the programme. Now, talking about music and entertainment, the Brit Awards will take place tonight on a Saturday night for the first time, following the controversy of its lack of female nominees in its Best Artist category. But who are the bookies' favourites to win? And what can we expect this evening? Should we elect to tune in? Joining me to tell me more about it all is entertainment reporter at the Metro newspaper, Lucy Norris. And there she is. Lucy, great to see you again. Thanks very much indeed. The Adele kind of put the whole boot into gender-neutral categories, didn't she, last time? It clearly hasn't gone away.
Yes, Alastair. Well, thank you so much for having me. I think, as you said, this year, a lot of controversy was raised again at the nominations for Best Artist. Adele last year won in the category when the Brits, for the first time, decided to go gender neutral. But she, in her speech herself, acknowledged the fact that she was a female artist and wanted to be acknowledged for her work in that capacity. This year, many have criticized the Brits for their list of nominees that contained 5 male artists, saying that whilst their efforts to be more inclusive was a step in the right direction, it kind of went the other way this year by refusing to acknowledge any females' work. The Brits, though, have commented on the backlash, claiming that it was just a reflection of the music industry in general at the moment, saying that of the 70 eligible artists that submitted their work to be put up for an award this year, only 12 were female, with big players like Adele, Cat Burns and Anne-Marie not meeting the criteria.
Does the industry itself still take the Brits as seriously as they did once upon a time? Not that long ago that the newspapers, including your own excellent newspaper, were full of coverage of the Grammy Awards, and then with the sad passing of Burt Bacharach, that gets mentioned as well. How many Oscars he won, how many Grammys, and all the rest of it. Do the Brits still matter to the industry?
I feel that they do. I think any awards are always quite buzzworthy and people are very excited for them. I think it always means more to be handed more of a professional recognition for your work rather than watching numbers go up and down on screens. I think this year in particular, a lot of excitement around the Brit Awards. There's a lot of big names and a lot of exciting performances that are due to happen. And as we saw from the Grammys last week, a lot of people tuned in, more than was expected. And I think that having it on a Saturday night tonight is going to make a difference. And also with the inclusion of artists that have made a name for themselves on social media platforms, such as Mimi Webb and Kat Burns, who enjoyed millions of views and downloads from their tracks online, are definitely bringing in more of a younger audience, meaning that in terms of industry recognition and in terms of being able to secure those spots to be placed in front of the amount of people that you need to hear your music, I think the significance is definitely going up.
Who are you hearing is going to be performing at the Brits, Lucy?
Yeah, so this year we have a really exciting lineup of performances from Harry Styles, of course, following his performance at the Grammys. He's hoping that he won't take a tumble this time as he did last Sunday when his stage malfunctioned, but he will be back to lead the charge, as well as Lizzo, who is an American artist who is coming back to perform and is very highly anticipated. We also have Sam Smith and Kim Petras, Lewis Capaldi and Kat Burns, who I mentioned, who is also nominated as Best Newcomer for this year. Also, we have Wet Leg, who is the indie duo from the Isle of Wight, who are coming off the back of winning 2 Grammys last weekend, less than 2 years after they performed a live gig for the first time since beginning their career.
Wet Leg's a great story, isn't it? I live in Hampshire, so across to the Isle of Wight, good luck to them. But I think it was only a year ago that they thought they might have a pop at it, and what a triumph it has been in such a short period of time. We wish them well and all of the rest of them. Lucy, great to see you again. Thank you very much indeed. Lucy Norris there, the entertainment correspondent for Metro. Now, Taxi Charity, an organisation that helps veterans return to places like Normandy for commemorations, is celebrating its 75th anniversary. Yesterday, London black taxi drivers, black cab drivers, joined veterans at a location in central London to mark the milestone. And GB News London reporter Lisa Hartle, I do beg your pardon, went to meet one of the veterans helped by that brilliant charity. Here's her report.
This was in 1944, just before D-Day. My parents insisted I go to a studio, photographic studio, to have a photograph taken. I think that was in case I didn't come back.
For veterans like Mervyn, the Taxi Charity provides a link to the past, a chance to return to places like Normandy for D-Day commemorations and pay their respects to fallen comrades.
It's a lot. I've been several times now, over a few years, but as I've always said, it's going there, it's being able to come back again, where so many of my comrades are still there. It brings it home, what could have been, more than it did at the time, actually. And we couldn't do it without the taxis. I don't think I could manage on the ferry or by air. Not anymore, anyway. I'm 98 now.
Mervyn was just 19 years old when he was first deployed during the Second World War. Serving with the Royal Army Ordnance Corps, he went into Normandy on D-Day, a treacherous trip, having lost comrades the day before when their boat was hit by a torpedo.
They heard the big shells going from our huge warships to the land and from the Germans back at the warships. Nobody bothered with me, thank goodness. They thought I wasn't worth bothering with. But it was very frightening, and it literally did get frightened. That's the first time I took out my book of Psalms and was reading them.
The Taxi Charity for Military Veterans is celebrating its 75th year. Run by London black taxi drivers, it's been supporting thousands of veterans since 1948.
We look after any veterans that need our help. We take them around the UK, and now, the last 10, 15 years, we've been taking them back to the Netherlands and to Normandy to pay respects to their fallen comrades who are still there. It gives them a chance to get to see their friends again. Only veterans understand what veterans think and how veterans feel. We as taxi drivers, and you and me, unless you've walked in their shoes, you have no idea how they feel and how they think. So for them to get back together again with their comrades, it means a lot to them. And as the years go by and they get fewer and fewer, it's more and more special for them.
Mervyn now writes poems to reflect on his time during the war.
I'll go again to Normandy, where I was once before, but then I was in uniform in June of '44.
The charity will be celebrating its anniversary with several events, raising money to ensure veterans like Mervyn can continue to pay their respects to those who never returned home.
I'm not a hero, despite the medals that I wear. They merely mean that these I have just prove that I was there.
Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Lisa Hartle there reporting on the taxi charity. A brilliant group of men and women doing something profoundly important for another brilliant group of men, our veterans. So thanks to the taxi charity, and thank you also to all of the veterans. That, I'm afraid, is all that we have time for today. I will, however, be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I hope very much indeed that you can join me then for Alastair, Stewart and friends. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. A very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Hope you've been enjoying the weekend so far. It has been a fairly settled and dry one for many of us, and that is thanks to high pressure that is centred across continental Europe and stretching its way into the UK, keeping those weather fronts at bay to the north. There is a bit more of a squeeze in the isobars across parts of Scotland, so it is breezier here. Underneath that high pressure centre though, there is a fair amount of cloud, and that will stay with us in